So we're moving back into research talks. This is the last group of the day. And our first speaker is Jessica Harwood, who's going to talk about moving with the flow, plankton robots. Please help me welcome Jessica.
Hi again, everyone. I'll make a great effort to keep with the time, but I have someone to let me know if not. So as my title says, I'll be telling you about measurements by plankton robots. There's a quick introduction of who I am. I'm one of the newest faculty in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Science, but I'm here at Hatfield and also a NOAA affiliate. So I work in both places with people at NOAA and OSU. And my interests are small-scale physical biological interaction and Lagrangian transport. And that simply means transport of organisms that move with the flow, or particles that move with the flow. And I'm also very interested in technology development and collaborate a lot with engineers. So in this quick overview of what I do, I will showcase kind of two main areas of my research and also directions forward. So one part is those plankton robots, which I will show, and autonomous sampling. That's kind of the technology. And then the hope is to then focus this for an Oregon perspective of the future ocean, but for organisms that move in the ocean, not ones that are stationary. And so here, the first vignette I will highlight is the work that I've done for my PhD with the plankton robots. And because my lab is here, you're one of the audience that actually gets to see it while I'm presenting. So I always get the criticism that they're much bigger than larvae. But I would argue they're very small for ocean like instrument and vehicles, right? So this is tiny. So that's our best larval approximation in situ. And you're welcome to come see them after, and I can explain a bit more how they work. So here, this is a picture that was taken by Eddie off the coast of San Diego during a bloom. And so what we have is these bands you see of higher fluorescence, right, that represent organisms that are aggregated, what we presume, by internal waves. So they're concentrated, and these internal waves, as they come on shore, they can transport plankton. So right now, just trust me that these are waves below the surface, and I'll explain them a little bit more. But I wanted to give you a visual of how pretty they can look. So here's a schematic of what an internal wave looks like. It moves from the left to the right, and the colors are ocean temperature, right? So water at depth are colder than water at the surface. And if you're a plankton that moves perfectly up and down with the waves, you'll go up and down as the wave goes, and you'll stay in this band of orange color, right? So you'll experience the same temperature as you move up and down. Your light might fluctuate, but your temperature won't. However, if you're a plankton that swims and seeks to keep a fixed depth, let's say there's an optimum light level that you like to be at, or you don't want to get too shallower, you might stay at a fixed depth, and then you're crossing these layers, right? So we can see that the copepod here is going across from this darker yellow to a lighter yellow. And so when they're in the middle of this wave, there's actually a temperature anomaly that's positive. And I should mention that internal waves in the coastal environment are often pointing down, right? You might be used to seeing waves with their crest upward, but in this case, they're often pointing down. And so what we have here with our plankton mimics, they have a temperature sensor, so they can record the temperature that they're experiencing every second. And they also have a pressure sensor and a piston, so they can go up and down in the water column, but we can program them to stay at 3-meter depth. And so they can act like these copepods. And so what happened when I deployed these plankton mimics in the ocean? On the x-axis, you have their cross-shore position, how close or far away they are from the beach. And on the y-axis, their along-shore position. And you'll see a dot appear as they move, and that will represent the temperature of the water they are experiencing. And so you can see that at the beginning, they're moving mostly in the along-shore direction, and then boom, a wave comes and picks them up. And we know that from the pressure signal, but also from the temperature. It gets warmer as the wave brings it to shore. So I mentioned surfers earlier. Well, I do think that I've spotted surfing internal waves. And this little blurb corresponds to about 30, 70 meters of transport towards shore over a very short amount of time. Over the entire deployment, they traveled 500 meters, and that was about 2 hours. And now that I've come to OSU, I've worked with engineers at UW and Joe, who's in the room, to look at how we can use similar technology to record predation events underwater. And so we have a salmon smolt that's tethered to one of these floats. The float's a bit bigger. And now with GoPros, we can see. And so we have the salmon smolt that's swimming along. And then if you pay attention, and then we'll see what happens. I may have missed it because I was looking at you, but essentially the predator eats the salmon smolt. And so that part was very exciting for Joe, who studies these predator-prey interactions. And the part that was really exciting for me is that the float actually stays for quite a while. It drifts with the fish. So I always thought I didn't study fish because they had independence and they knew where they wanted to go. And now I'm seeing that at times they might actually just drift also. And so now we're measuring salinity, we're measuring temperature, and we can start having information about the fish environment and this density. So that's something that I'm working on. And so how do we bring this to Oregon, except these fish that you just saw? It's really looking to have simulations that integrate the information that people from experiments, from observation, they integrate this information into virtual organisms, and then we move them with the flow, and we see what happens. And so one topic that we're particularly excited about, we have some proposal in submission for this, is looking at how flow is modified by floating offshore wind farms. And so here you have a schematic of one of those ocean layers being deformed down and up by the structure. And so for any organism that responds to light, that movement down and up could have implications. And the timing is perfect. I didn't think I would succeed.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next speaker is Simon Gearlofs, and he's going to be talking about building collaboration between PNNL and Hatfield. So please help me welcome Simon.
Thank you. Well, thanks. So this talk will be a little different. I'm not giving a science talk because I'm not a scientist. I'm giving more of a partnership talk because that's what I work on for Pacific Northwest National Lab. So I want to, first of all, just recognize sort of bottom line, we're a new partner here with the Hatfield Marine Science Center, and we're really excited to be here. So my boss, Chris Meinig, is in the audience here today. And we have a workshop coming up to sort of explore more functional directions for PNNL HMSC partnership. So hope that you join us there. And I want to recognize that we did just recently sign an MOU with Oregon State University, which we're really excited about, which is really focusing on ways that we can partner together around ocean climate action and the administration's new Ocean Climate Action Plan. And I guess my bottom line on ocean climate action is that it's creating new opportunities to work together at a regional scale and new opportunities for coalition building outside of maybe some of the traditional areas that we're working. So I hope to communicate that more here. So first of all, a little bit about Pacific Northwest National Lab. We do work with OSU, so we have many existing valued partners in the room, Sarah Henkel and Bryson Robertson and Dan Helene, and working with PacWave and PMEC and sort of different aspects of OSU over time. And Joe Haxel, who works at our Coastal Sciences Division, is also familiar to you. So you probably know a little bit about our lab, but just to give you a quick overview, Pacific Northwest National Lab our main campus is actually located in Richland, Washington. We're one of 17 DOE national laboratories. And we, in Sequim, Washington, which is where our marine lab is, we're actually DOE's only dedicated marine science laboratory. So PNNL, big organization, 6,000 people, campuses in Richland, Seattle, Portland, and we had this unique asset on the Olympic Peninsula. And you can see where it's located. I guess I describe it as our marine lab is about as far away from Seattle as Newport is from Portland. So we share a little bit of that sense of remoteness with you. And our community in Sequim is about the same size as Newport as well. So that's where we are. Our campus is basically 140 acres of both tidelands and uplands. We're located on Sequim Bay, which is a quiescent protected bay, which allows us to do some interesting research at times of the year when maybe you couldn't be working offshore in the Pacific Ocean. We have an existing set of research permits. It's a 5-year set of research permits, which allow us to do most things at our facility. So we can work in the bay. We do coordinate closely with local governments and our permitting agencies to do our work. And so we can work directly in Sequim Bay, but we also have research permits in Clallam Bay, which you can see is a little bit further out along the Olympic Peninsula. And it has a very different environment. Clallam Bay is a wavier place, a more energetic place, and it allows us to look at different questions around ocean energy and environmental sensor systems functioning in those more energetic environments. At Sequim, we like to talk about a bench to bay capability. So we have our wet labs located right on shore, adjacent to our research pier, and utilize relatively small research vessels to get out in our bay. And I think researchers are pleased with our facility in that they can work on their engineering problem in the laboratory, work with our biologists and chemists to sort of prove it out in the wet lab in our mesocosm facilities, and then within 2-3 minutes be on a boat out in the bay, able to deploy gear and retrieve gear. So it's a very easy place to work in that regard. And I think importantly for this presentation, PNNL and our Coastal Sciences Division, our research lab, has been really increasing R&D investments over the last 3 years as the Department of Energy has taken, I would say, more of an interest in offshore renewable energy and also ocean climate action. So we're developing a first of its kind hybrid research vessel, which will be able to operate on battery electric propulsion as well as diesel. We're developing a new underwater cabled array in partnership with the University of Washington and the Office of Naval Research. A new autonomous surface vessel, which is allowing us to explore both autonomy as well as sort of different energy charging systems for those vessels. And we're also, as a DOE lab, taking our commitment to decarbonization seriously and developing this integrated renewable energy system, which is essentially allowing us to bring on new forms of renewable energy, test those forms of renewable energy at our lab, and actually decarbonize our operations. So lots of investment. And as I mentioned, that investment is coming because DOE is taking more of an interest in the ocean. And so the Ocean Climate Action Plan, I'm sure most of you have heard of this, was released in March 2023. 22 agencies participated in developing this plan. And it really is the first of its kind. So the first holistic government plan, all of government plan to really thinking about the ocean's role in the climate system, both from the perspective of how we can adapt to rapid change, but also importantly, how do we think about the ocean as an asset in addressing decarbonization? So the Ocean Climate Action Plan has these 3 goals. Number 1, create a carbon neutral future, which encompasses things like offshore wind, marine carbon dioxide renewable and storage, maritime decarbonization, but also thinking about nature-based solutions for storing carbon. And then we heard about climate-ready fisheries in the last panel as well. So really that holistic approach. And we're starting to get our arms around this regionally. So it's one thing to have a national policy, but how do we start to think about organizing in the Pacific Northwest around the Ocean Climate Action Plan? So actually, Bryson helped us plan, along with our cluster organization, Maritime Blue, an event on September 20th, where we brought industry, communities, academia, government together, along with our partners at the Department of Energy and NOAA, to start thinking about how we can take a regional step forward to organize around ocean climate action. Oh, and then my last slide, sort of setting the stage for our workshop today. As I mentioned, PNNL and Oregon State University did sign an MOU last month on ocean science and technology. And you can see the topics of that MOU are really geared towards that cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, collaborative approach to addressing ocean climate solutions. So topics include offshore renewable energy, seafood and aquaculture innovation, climate impacts on coastal communities, marine carbon storage, ocean observing, innovation, and workforce. And what we're really trying to do is establish mechanisms for our laboratory and Hatfield Marine Science Center and OSU to think about making common research investments to really expand our capacity and coordination with one another, through student partnerships and research partnerships. So really hope to see some of you in our session coming up next and hope to dig into this more. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Our next speaker, I'm thrilled that it's one of the students that's here at Hatfield. We mainly have a lot of presentations by people who've been around for a while. Luke Stuntz is going to talk about predation of seabirds by terrestrial carnivores. Please help me welcome Luke.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Well, yeah, so right now I'm going to be taking a pretty hard left turn in terms of my topic, and I'll be discussing predation of seabirds by terrestrial mammals along the southern Oregon coast. Oh, there we go. So at the center of my talk today are two species that are extremely disparate, that they're researched in different contexts, they're talked about in different ways. So on the one hand, you have a seabird that spends much of its life living on the open ocean. And on the other hand, you have a terrestrial mammal that primarily inhabits the rivers of inland North America. So the Leach's storm petrel is the second most abundant breeding seabird in Oregon, but we've seen pretty severe declines at several colonies along the south coast. And this is a species that's very poorly adapted to terrestrial predation, whether it be from rodents or from carnivores like the river otter. River otters are a hyper-adaptable generalist species, so they have very complex and dynamic social systems that are well adapted to their foraging in specific contexts. So depending on available prey, river otters can really change their diets quite dramatically. And while their name might suggest that they exclusively use freshwater systems, this just isn't the case. So in coastal systems throughout North America, you can see river otter activity, and you even get populations that exclusively forage on marine prey. And so while it seems like these two species should be worlds apart, in certain contexts, their natural use of habitat can overlap. And so while there's been almost no work on predation of seabirds by river otters, there's also almost no reason to assume that such predation should be rare at all. And to integrate this into the context of today's summit a little bit more, we might even expect more predation to occur as inshore fisheries are damaged by warming climates. Otters are going to have to seek out alternative prey sources. So one place where these two species overlap is the southern Oregon coast. 95% of Oregon's Leach's storm petrels live on just 7 small islands along a 20-mile stretch between Gold Beach and Brookings. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over the last decade has become increasingly interested in proactive management of these seabird colonies. The problem is we know very little about the prevalence and behavior of predators at these sites. So in 2023 and over the next 2 years, myself and a team of field technicians will be based out of OSU's Port Orford Field Station to monitor predator activity at these islands. And so we're taking a number of different field methods for this project because what we're really trying to do is to integrate a natural history-based research approach into a monitoring and management framework. So our work will be used to guide the decision-making of Fish and Wildlife Service personnel, but we're also trying to answer really fundamental questions about how river otters are using seabirds as an alternative prey in certain contexts. So our first primary method is cellular camera trapping. On all of these islands, we have arrays of solar-powered cameras that then take photos and upload those photos to a web server that can be accessed at any time. So we essentially get a live time feed that lets us continually monitor predator activity on the islands. When we can get out to the islands in person, we conduct these qualitative predator sign surveys, and there we really try to document any sign of predator behavior or predator activity. So that could be scat, tracks, dens, that sort of thing. And on the more quantitative side of things, we have our scat analysis. So we regularly collect river otter scat, analyze the prey species that are present, and then use that to build an index of storm petrel predation throughout the year. And so going into 2023, I really didn't know what to expect in terms of mammal activity on the islands, but we did indeed find that river otters are actively hunting storm petrels at least 2 major colonies, including the largest storm petrel colony on the Oregon coast. And this predation was driven on both islands by these small, clearly defined social groups. And that's really interesting in the context of the link between sociality and foraging, because the islands, which are this hyper-abundant but niche food resource, are being dominated as the exclusive territory of individual social groups. But this predation also occurred in these really short bouts of nocturnal activity. So otters weren't resident on the island summer long. Instead, they just swam out to the island from the coast, for a few hours of foraging, and this might happen on a few consecutive nights, but it wasn't happening consistently throughout a month. And that suggests that the islands really just serve as one component of the river otter's natural home range. They might forage on storm petrels, but it's not a primary component of their diets. And we also saw a really clear seasonal trend in this predation. I won't go into too much detail about these two plots, but basically they represent two indices showing the same trend, which is that predation is highest in the spring, then declines throughout the summer, despite the continued presence of storm petrels. And this gives us a bit of information about how otters are actually hunting seabirds. Because in the spring, adult storm petrels are very active around the colony at nights. They're socially interacting with other individuals and they're prospecting for burrow sites. But during the summer months, storm petrels are either in their burrow with an egg or a chick, or they're away foraging at sea. And so this suggests that river otters are hunting adult petrels on the wing, and then that in turn affects how we might view predation as an impact on colony persistence, because that suggests that otter predation isn't actually directly affecting nest success, but instead might be more targeted at non-breeding individuals. And I went into this season expecting just to work with river otter, but it turns out you don't really get to pick what animals are active at your study sites. And this was unexpected, but since July 15th, we've had a resident pair of American mink present on Goat Island, which again is home to about 185,000 storm petrels. These mink, which are on the island full time, are different from the otters, not just in terms of how they're visiting the island, but how they're also using the storm petrels as a prey resource. So we have extensive evidence that the mink are actually surplus killing storm petrels. What this means is that they're killing far more petrels than they could ever possibly eat. When we went out to the islands in August and September, they were just littered with intact carcasses of adult storm petrels. So it was extremely morbid. And what this suggests is that the mink could actually be a much larger problem than the otters, because they're present on the island for longer, they're present on the island during the breeding season, and they're killing far more petrels when they are actively foraging. I'm about to run out of time, so I won't go into too many details here, but trust me when I say we're doing some pretty cool stuff over the next year, including trying to integrate a lot more genetic work into this. And then we're also going to be moving from a monitoring phase of this project into more of a management phase in our work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But thank you so much. If you want to talk otters, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Luke. Our next talk is by Damon Bailey, who is going to provide us with an update on regional class vessel research vessels, which has seen some bumps in the road, I would say, over time. It's not clear yet.
You're stealing my thunder. Yeah, it's been stormy seas, no doubt about it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Like she said, I'm Damian Bailey. I'm the PI/PM for the Regional Class Research Vessel Project. It's an NSF science infrastructure project managed under the NSF Major Research Office. I know I only have 7 minutes, so I'm actually trying to fill in. So there are part of the program are 2 other vessels besides the Tawny, which is coming to OSU. I'll give more information about how that's going to work. The research vessel Narragansett Dawn, it will be the 2nd vessel and operated by the University of Rhode Island on the East Coast. And the RV Gilbert R. Mason is scheduled to go operate in the Gulf Coast later on in this decade. So we have 3 great ships coming our way soon. This talk is going to focus on the science capabilities and what you might expect to see when you go out on her in a few years. So it's a vessel about 200 feet long, 40 feet wide or so, bigger than Oceanus, not an ocean class, but bigger than what's traditionally known as a regional class. So it's more of the intermediate class, although we still call it it's a regional class for the 21st century, we're calling it. So it's going to be very capable, very adaptable, and it's going to be a ship that you're going to want to sail on. Those have been our 3 main design factors when we've been moving through the various decision gates. We want them to be able to do just about anything that you as the science community are going to demand. As alluded to, we've had some challenges along the way. The image there on the left is kind of a picture of the design, the model that we've had. Very complicated, very aggressive design to fit a lot of capability into a small, efficient package has proven to be a challenge for our shipyard partners. Of course, COVID came, which disrupted everything from supply chains to available shipyard workers. The shipyard was sold to another shipyard. There have been a number of things along the way, but one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing that we had to deal with was the largest hurricane to ever make landfall in Louisiana. Made just about direct eye passage over the shipyard. As a result, this is 2 days later. This image is from our friends at NOAA. You can see extensive flooding throughout the shipyard and wind damage as well. Down in the lower left of this image, that's where all of our equipment was stored. Those tents were completely demolished and set us back quite a bit. But we've recovered. So here's the vessel coming to Newport before too long. I've got some dates for you to show, but all that to say is we are back on track and we're looking good. So what are these vessels going to be able to do? Everything that you know and more. So, so we're going to have a crane on the bow, a crane on the stern, of course, that is going to be able to reach everywhere on the back deck. It's going to be a dedicated CTD launching system and the ability to bring the CTD indoors so you can work on it out of the weather. And then this A-frame is a whole new take on an A-frame that I don't think exists anywhere on any ship right now. So here's a quick video of it. You'll note that it's double articulated. So not only does it go like this, but it goes like this as well. So it's sort of got a wrist and an elbow. And in addition, the top bar, let me get this video going. The top bar, you'll notice it's on trunnion bearing, so it actually rotates. So it's on a brake right now, and then they release the brake, and you'll see it swing. That's the top bar, right? Right. Anyway, so they release it shortly. There. Okay. So the idea is it can free float with the package when the brake's not on. So that's going to provide safety and stability as you deploy it, and it can go all the way down to the water edge and all the way down to the deck on the other side. So about 160 degrees of operation. We've also developed a specific coring device working with the OSU's MARSAM group. You can see it there on the starboard quarter, the back right side of the vessel. It's going to use the A-frame and have the ability to actually pivot around the quarter like that, and then bring up to 50 feet, perhaps even longer cores up onto the starboard rail. This is an exciting part of the ship. It's a deployable centerboard. You can see on the left-hand side, there's an ADCP, there's shallow water multi-beam, there's going to be a USBL for communication with ROVs. The centerboard feet is replaceable, so you can put on entirely different suites of sensors, and it's hot swappable while the ship is at the dock. Forward, it's going to have deep water multi-beam, and this is the fisheries sonar suite, DK60, as well as a number of other sensors. I keep talking about sensors. These are going to have more sensors than I think any other vessel out there. There's a extremely dense and robust suite of MET and flow-through and other sensors that you will have access to in real time on the shore, and I'll talk about that. I'm not going to talk about these, but if anybody wants to download the presentation later, that's why I put that here for the flow-through sensors. So this is the mast. It's going to be very adaptable, very accessible. It's going to have 3 radars, including a wave radar. You can see little benches that you'll be able to sit on. And then it's also got Venturi, so based on NOAA's mammal ships. So you can sit up there basically without any wind in your face. It's going to be a nice place to be. Vast array of MET sensors. Here they are, upward looking. So we'll be able to look to the top of the atmosphere to below the ocean bottom. Skipping over that. Okay, so I alluded you'll be able to see these data in real time ashore. That's using the system called Coriolis that has been developed in-house. It's going to be a fabulous way to have virtual presence ashore and be able to access and manipulate the data from all of this vast array of sensors. In my last 1 minute and 22 seconds, I just have this positive video that I would like to show you. This is from our launch a few months ago. And I guess I don't get to play it. No. Oh, well, it's an exciting video. You'll have to check it out online. Okay. All right. So when are you going to see your vessel? All right. So these are our published dates right now. And I would say about 3 or 4 months later than this across the board. So the important date here that I think people in this room might be interested in is arrival in Newport. And you can see that that is set for September of next year, so 3 or 4 months after that. So probably the beginning of 2025, there'll be a new ship parked at the Ship Ops Pier. Thank you.
So exciting to have a new ship out front. It is. Our last talk of the session is by Karina Nielsen. What's happening with offshore wind in Oregon?
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I think the answer to what's happening with offshore wind in Oregon is quite a lot. There have been, since April of 2022, when the BOEM call areas were announced, there have been a flurry of activities, including new collaboration with NCOS, the NOAA's Center for Coastal Ocean Science, spatial suitability model, which recently came out. There have been resolutions from important bodies weighing in. The National Congress of American Indians would like a pause. The Pacific Fisheries Marine Council has asked to rescind the call areas and restart the process. There had been a flurry of political activities recently, which I'll tell you a little more about. The BOEM draft wind energy areas have been announced. There has been a cluster of public meetings very recently that have happened both on the southern coast and here in Newport. And the public comment period on the draft wind energy areas has been extended longer than it normally is. It's normally 30 days. It was extended to 60 days, and it was extended again recently to the end of this month. In addition, yesterday when I looked, there were over 700 comments already in the docket. So that's one of the things. That's sort of a quick overview. Just in terms of the politics, it's very interesting here in Oregon. The governor, as some of you may have heard, earlier in the summer issued a letter asking BOEM to pause and provide more time for public engagement and public comment. The governor was joined by our state senators and 2 of our congressional representatives. There was additional comment to provide the public engagement opportunities and then to ask for more time yet again. So the politicians in our region are very involved in this conversation. The reception, the mood of the public meetings, and Angie and I attended, there are other people who have been attending, working with Hilary Boudet and some of the social scientists who are involved in tracking this issue. You could speak with them if you want to get a little more detail, but decidedly unhappy. There are lots of concerns around trade-offs and impacts to fisheries, to the environment. There are lots of questions being asked about what are these trade-offs? Is the energy all going to California? What does that mean for our community? Skepticism about community benefits. And so there's a lot of real legitimate questions and concerns and uncertainty, questions that need to be answered for folks, for them to maybe understand it. And maybe we don't understand everything that we're moving forward with. At the same time, as you just heard from our colleagues at PNLL, there is a lot of energy going into research and studies and trying to answer some of those questions. What's the grid? What's the transmission? What's the value? What's the analysis economically? This is just one of the most recent studies that have come out that proclaim that there could be billions in value to the US West Coast, although there's also concerns about the costs going up and the supply chain issues. So there's a lot to keep up with. This is only a smattering, but I think it brings you a little bit up to speed on some of the big topics. The big arrow there is showing where we still are on the BOEM timeline process for outer continental shelf leasing. We're still in that area identification phase. Notice they think that takes half a year. We were already almost rounding the corner on a year and a half, so it's taken longer here. And one of the big timeline pressures, which I think not everybody is fully aware of, but that is driving some of this pressure cooker, is the connection that was made in the legislation, the IRA legislation that was passed between oil and gas leasing and offshore wind leasing for outer continental shelf. So in order to offer up leases for offshore wind, there has to have been a minimum amount of offshore oil leasing done. And the Biden administration just announced a few more areas for oil in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's part of what's driving the timeline here. So some new information. So this is more about research and analyses that have been done. I mentioned the spatial suitability modeling that had been done by NCOS. I am not going to go into detail here. The links are in my talk. You'll be able to pick them up later, but I wanted to give you just the quick overview. They took a lot of different data sets. They put them into a spatial model and came up with a final suitability heat map. I'm not going to give you all the details, not enough time and not my work. This is the final result. The big red area you're seeing around the Coos Bay call area is a Department of Defense exclusion area. And then the heat map represents the relative suitability, which the cooler colors represent the areas with the least conflict. In addition, then BOEM went ahead and laid on their grid, and this is what they've come up with. You can see that the final draft wind energy areas that are going to be under consideration are clustered over the cooler colored areas. And then here's what they look like without the heat map underneath. The total amount of acreage that is being considered now is reduced from over 1 million acres. It was reduced by about 81% in total, down to about 200,000 acres. So that's kind of the spatial where we are. Recent OSU activity and Oregon Sea Grant awards and activities. I just wanted to call your attention. It's been in the press. There is a new award through PMAC to Hillary Boudet, Sean Hasboon, and we are going to be working with them to some extent on a social science study, understanding people's perceptions of offshore wind. And Sea Grant ourselves, we are searching right now for a specialist, an extension specialist with funding from the Department of Energy and Sea Grant to help do some more community engagement. And the other thing that you may have seen some of the panoramas out in the hallway by the lunchroom and where you're getting snacks. These are from BOEM's latest visualization study, which gives you a sense of the view shed. And if you stand about 2 feet maybe away from those panoramas, that's about what you would see if you were standing on the shoreline in terms of the hypothetical wind turbine farm. I am going to play, I have my stop. I'm going to let you watch, but I encourage you to stay to the end, a 1-minute video that is a visualization from Harris Beach. And then after that, a slide with a QR code will pop up if you want to grab my slides with the links. So thank you for your attention. Happy to talk further. Let me see if I can move this effectively the way I was taught. Okay. Oh, now I can't play it. Oh, I can. Can my mouse come over here? There we go. This is under best viz conditions, using 10 years of Met data from this area. And kind of see them popping up there. And I ask you to stay to the end because the evening view, I think, will be of interest. That flashing you're seeing are the nav lights for FAA and US Coast Guard current regs for that kind of array. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was great. Thank you again to all the speakers in the last session, actually all the speakers today. I think we've had really excellent presentations. So we are now going to move into the breakout room session. But before we do, I want to try something completely new because I'm big on new things. How many of you have ever done a wave at a scientific meeting? None. Okay, so we're going to start over there. You guys know how to do this. You stand up, and it moves across, and it hits this wall, and it moves back. Okay, ready? You guys on that side. There you go. All right. Okay, and it's bouncing back. Okay, so we do have an announcement. The plastics in the environment breakout room is not happening. Suzanne was in Texas. She tried as hard as she could to get here in time, but her plane was late and she is not here. So if you were in the plastics in the environment room, pick another room. So they are here and you can go anywhere you want. So take a good look at this list. Decide one that you would rather go to. And we encourage you, please don't just go back to your office. Go to one of these rooms. Be inspired. So we will be back here at 4:45 for wrap up. So talk to you then.
For folks online, we're going to end the presentation now. Thanks so much for being a part of today's research seminar and summit. Appreciate it.